countries since conditions differ. During 2.5 decades, economic growth has been satisfactorily high. This goes along with that of the regional trend. Among the success factors are the shift to market-oriented economy, openness to the world, and integration to the regional trading system. Laos is, though, a small market, but it is surrounded by large markets, such as China, Thailand, and Vietnam. By adopting an outward orientation, we have managed to attract foreign investment and increase export to both regional and faraway markets. In the years to come, export-led growth needs to be considered more deeply, taking into account the realities of each country. It will not work the same way for Laos as for other countries. Laos' comparative advantage is resource-based industry. Given the geographical location and existing export pattern of commodities, Laos will focus on the regional markets, especially through border trade, and gradually add and retain value to its exports. I have not talked about the garment export to the EU market and other developed markets, which is enabled by the trade preference system. With regards to export of goods, it seems that every country is trying to sell something. Hence, competition will be higher and higher. Trade barriers in whatever forms will still remain for the foreseeable future. Export competitiveness in LDC is not something you can address overnight. In this respect, we tend to forget that sources of economic growth derive from services as well, including trade as well. Trade here should encompass trade in services, which we in NDC are not used to. In Laos, we try to reduce our trade deficit. Somebody says, why are you doing so? The country is in the development process. Even a country like the USA is still having trade deficit. The fact is that while looking at the country's balance of payment, the trade deficit is offset to a certain extent by the surplus of export of services. My message here is that services can be a potential for growth. In the case of Laos, tourism and banking sectors are flourishing. Two other potential areas remain to be considered, that is ICT and logistics. These areas need further investment by the private sector and public policy to support. Although we have liberalized our telecom sector, the access to internet is still limited, technologically not up to date, and not generally affordable. My second point is that we are used to the concept that our trading partners should be a developed country. We tend to overlook that regional markets are emerging markets. In the case of Laos, we realize such importance. Hence, we have to take advantage of the geographical location, proximity to emerging market. While neighboring countries are prospering, it is a favorable condition for us to grow also. In addition, there is a need for countries in the sub-region to trade among themselves. This is particularly relevant to develop transit transport and logistics services in my country. In doing so, we can transform the state of landlockedness, which has been a handicap for our exports for many years, to a landlinked country. Looking from the market perspective, the world market is becoming more and more consumer-driven. And there is a shift from the mass market to the micro market. Therefore, niche market, including fair trade, will continue to play an important role for LDCs. In other respects, we should also think of diversification of products as well as of markets. My last point is that when thinking ahead and planning for the future, trade support institutions should devise suitable programs and projects to cater for the needs of exporters, especially those in LDCs and developing countries, to cope with changing environment. In this connection, National TPO or TSI is to cooperate more with Aid for Trade agencies and seek necessary assistance, especially in the area of trade information. The introduction of ICT to a more wider use by entrepreneurs who are seeking to supply potential markets. I wish to point out that the forum will agree with me that the works done by ITC are down-to-earth approach and very relevant to export promotion and development at the world level. With this note, I now conclude my remark and wish the forum a fruitful outcome. Thank you for your attention.
And we can now turn the floor open to questions. Again, I'd like to remind you, it would be helpful if you would identify yourself, keep the question relatively succinct, and direct it at a particular panelist if that seems appropriate.
Thank you. This afternoon, under the theme Innovative Models for Business, we were talking about voluntary standards and how voluntary standards can be beneficial to businesses in terms of accessing markets and being able to improve their products and so forth in order to access external markets. Senator, you've just noted in your statement that these can be barriers. So I would want to get some more clarification on how you see voluntary standards being barriers. Thank you.
I think you have to understand that sometimes the flip side of strength is weakness, and all things have to be taken in context. Imposition of standards can operate to exclude entry into markets. And in my own region, we have seen that. So I don't know if you're speaking of any particular standards or anything in particular, but that is what we have seen. There is a place for it, but the flip side is that it also operates as barrier.
Other questions, comments from the floor?
I'd like to address the question to the Minister, please. CARDI is one of the institutions in Caribbean that I'm very interested in getting information from, particularly for dasheen and yam, for not only processing, but the actual added value of that product for consumers. Because today, one of the issues we really do face is the consumer is very knowledgeable, and if he doesn't understand, he will go on and Google and find out. So I was just wondering, is there any way you could facilitate access for us to CARDI?
If I may restate the question, because I think some of the panelists managed to understand it and some were left a little bit wondering. The question is, if I reinterpret it, it's a little bit, if you think of upstream suppliers and value-added chains, there are a lot of countries that are stuck with very, very small slivers of those value chains. And the question is, how do you move forward closer to the customer along that value chain, both to capture more value added and to have the kind of control that increasingly knowledgeable customers insist on as they're sort of trying to figure out whether their coffee is grown to certain standards or whatever. So I'm not sure which of our panelists would like to start with that. It offers opportunities for multiple interventions.
If I get the question right, I think, so, you know, for the ICT, it can be widely used for the, not for the user to get the valued information and the information quality from the internet, from the technologies the government can provide to improve their, you know, understanding.